Welcome to the Shifting Inward podcast, where we explore the mindset blocks that keep entrepreneurs stuck. Your mind is one of the most powerful tools at your disposal. Your thoughts shape your actions, and your actions drive your success. When you shift what's happening internally, everything externally starts to move. Hi, I'm Joe Rizk, and in this episode, we're discussing fear of failure, but not in the way you might expect. We're going deeper into what failure actually means, why we're so afraid of it, and how calling something a failure is often just a way to protect ourselves from a harder truth. So let's get into it. Fear of failure is one of the most common reasons entrepreneurs stay stuck. But here's what most people don't realize. Failure isn't an objective truth. It's a decision. It's a label you assign when you've decided to stop. Think about it. Some people try something for a few weeks, don't see immediate results, and call it a failure. Others work on the same thing for years, adjust and iterate, and eventually succeed. The difference isn't the idea. It's how long they were willing to stay in the discomfort before deciding if it didn't work. So when you say you're afraid of failure, what you're really afraid of is the pain of stopping, the vulnerability of admitting, I tried and I'm done, the shame of deciding that something you invested in didn't turn out the way you hoped. And here's the deeper truth. Fear of failure is rooted in past pain. You've tried something before. You stopped, you called it a failure. You felt the disappointment, the embarrassment, the sting of it not working. So now your brain says, never again. We don't want to feel this way anymore. But failure isn't just about the outcome. It's about what the outcome means about you. Because calling something a failure is a way to separate yourself from the responsibility of it. It's easier to say, this didn't work, than to say, I didn't figure it out. It's easier to blame the timing, the market, the competition, than to face the possibility that you reached the limit of your capacity, or at least the limit of what you were willing to endure. So what does fear of failure actually look like in your business? Maybe you procrastinate on launching. You keep refining, tweaking, preparing, telling yourself it's not ready yet. But really, you're delaying the moment when people can say no. You're delaying the possibility of it not working. Because as long as it's still in progress, there's no chance of failure. Maybe you start things but never finish them. You get excited about an idea, work on it for a while, then quietly let it fade. You tell yourself you lost interest or the timing wasn't right. But really, you stopped before you had to face whether or not it would succeed. And here's a big one. You've been working on something for months, maybe even years. You're deep in it. You've invested time, money, and energy. And it's harder than you thought it would ever be. Progress is slow. You're not sure how to make it work. And instead of admitting, I don't know how to figure this out, you start building a case for why it's not worth continuing. You find every possible reason to justify quitting. The market is too saturated. The timing is off. People don't want it. It's too competitive. And you use the same passion and eloquence you had when you started, when you were convincing yourself and others why this was a great idea, to now convince yourself why it's not anymore. Maybe you're afraid to put yourself out there because you're terrified of public failure. You don't want people to see you try and not succeed. You don't want to be the person who launched something and have it flop. So you stay invisible. You stay quiet. You protect yourself from judgment by never giving anyone a chance to judge you. Or maybe you've already experienced failure before. You tried something, it didn't work out, and you called it a failure. And that pain, that shame, that disappointment, it's still in you. So now every time you think about trying something new, your brain flashes back to that moment and says, hey, remember how we felt? Let's not do that again. And here's what happens. You avoid anything that feels risky. You play it safe, you stay in your comfort zone. You convince yourself that you're being smart, strategic, and careful. But really, you're protecting yourself from the possibility of feeling that pain again. So, where does this fear come from? A lot of it is rooted in how you've been conditioned to view failure. Maybe you grew up in an environment where mistakes were criticized, not treated as learning opportunities, where falling short meant disappointment, shame, or judgment. So you learned early failure is something to avoid at all costs. Or maybe you've experienced a painful failure in the past. You tried something, poured yourself into it, and it didn't work. And the emotional aftermath, the embarrassment, the self doubt, the feeling of letting people down was so intense that your brain made a decision: never put yourself in that position again. So now fear of failure isn't theoretical, it's visceral. It's a memory your brain is trying to protect you from reliving. But here's the deeper layer. Fear of failure is really fear of what failure means about you. It's not just this didn't work, it's I'm not capable. It's not just people didn't buy, it's I have nothing valuable that people are willing to spend money on. The failure becomes proof of something that you've secretly believed about yourself all along. And that's why calling something a failure is so appealing. It externalizes the problem. It makes it about the idea, the timing, the market, anything but you. Because admitting I couldn't figure this out or I reached my limit feels too vulnerable. It feels like confirming your worst fear, that you're simply not cut out for this. There's also this: you're in deep. You've invested months or years into something. You're publicly identified with it. People know you're working on it, and now it's harder than you thought. You're not sure how to make it work, and the thought of admitting that to yourself and to others, that feels unbearable. So instead, you start justifying why it's not worth continuing. You flip the narrative. You find reasons to quit that feel rational, strategic, even wise. But underneath, you're protecting yourself from the pain of facing your perceived limitations. And here's what makes fear of failure so powerful: it's self-fulfilling. You're so afraid of failing that you don't try, or you quit too early, or you play it safe. Then you never give yourself the chance to succeed. The fear creates the very outcome that you're trying to avoid. So let's reframe this. Failure isn't a thing that happens to you. It's a decision that you make. It's the moment you decide to stop and label the outcome as this didn't work. But someone else could look at the exact same situation and decide to keep going, to adjust, to iterate, and eventually succeed. The difference isn't the idea or the circumstances. It's how long you're willing to stay in the discomfort before you decide that it's over. Here's the shift. What you call failure is often just feedback. It's information. It's data about what's working and what's not. But instead of treating it as a learning opportunity, you treat it as a verdict. You make it mean something final about you or your capability, and that's when you quit. Another shift. The fear isn't about the outcome. It's about what the outcome means about you. You're not afraid of launching and getting no sales. You're afraid that no sales means you have nothing valuable to offer. You're not afraid of trying and it not working. You're afraid that not working means you're not capable. But those are two completely different things. The outcome doesn't define your worth or your potential. It just points you in the direction of what you need to adjust. And here's the truth. Calling something a failure is often just self-protection. It's easy to say this didn't work than to say I couldn't really figure it out. It's easier to blame the market, the timing, and the competition than to face the possibility that you reached the edge of your comfort zone and couldn't push through it. Naming it a failure externalizes the problem. It takes the weight off of you, but it also robs you of the chance to grow. Here's something worth noting. Part of why people give up is because success doesn't look like what they imagined. They pictured something exciting, glamorous, and impressive. But real success, it's really repetitive. It's unglamorous. It's showing up and doing the boring work consistently, year after year. When the reality doesn't match the fantasy, they convince themselves that it's not working, when really, they just didn't understand what success actually looks like. And here's another reframe. You haven't reached your limit. You've reached the limit of what you are willing to endure in that moment. That's a difference. Your capability isn't fixed. It grows as you push through discomfort, as you figure things out, as you learn what you didn't know before. But if you quit every time it gets hard, you never expand that capacity. So you stay within the same boundaries. So stop asking, what if I fail? And start asking, what if I stay long enough to figure it out? Because people who succeed aren't the ones who never fail, they're the ones who refuse to call it failure and they keep going. So how do you actually move past fear of failure? First, redefine what failure means. Stop treating it as a final verdict. Start treating it as feedback. When something doesn't go the way you hoped, ask yourself, what did I learn? What can I adjust? And what could I do differently next time? Failure isn't the end, it's information, so use that information to your benefit. Second, separate the outcome from your identity. Just because something didn't work doesn't mean you're incapable. It means this approach in this moment with these circumstances didn't produce the result you wanted. That's it. It doesn't define you. It doesn't determine your future. It's just one data point in a much longer journey. Third, give yourself a longer runway before you decide. Commit upfront. I'm going to work on this for 6 months or a year or whatever time that you need before you evaluate whether it's working. No quitting before that. No calling it a failure early on. Give yourself enough time to push through the hard middle part, to learn, to adjust, and to see what's actually possible. Fourth, get comfortable with discomfort. Success requires staying in the zone where you don't have all the answers, where you're not sure if it's working yet, where progress is slow and you're figuring things out as you go. That discomfort isn't a sign you're failing, it's a sign you're growing, and learning to tolerate it can be very helpful. Fifth, stop justifying quitting. Notice when you start building a case for why something isn't worth continuing. Notice when you flip from defending why you started to defending why you should stop. That's fear talking. Challenge it. Ask yourself, am I quitting because this isn't working? Or am I quitting because it's harder than I expected and I don't want to face that? Sixth, focus on what you can control. You can't control whether people buy. You can't control how fast you grow. You can't control market conditions. But you can control your effort, your consistency, your willingness to adjust and to learn. Stop measuring success by outcomes you can't control and start measuring by the actions you're taking every day. And finally, remind yourself, there is no failure, only feedback and stopping points. The difference between someone who failed and someone who succeeded is often just that one person kept going longer. They didn't interpret slow progress as failure. They didn't stop when things got hard. They stayed long enough to figure it out. You're not afraid of failure. You're afraid of being defined by it. You're afraid of confirming the story you've been running from, that you're not capable, not enough, or not cut out for this. But here's the truth. The outcome doesn't define you. Your willingness to keep going, that's what defines you. So stop letting fear write the ending before you've ever given yourself a chance to finish the story. If this resonated, drop a comment and share your story. Have you struggled with fear of failure? Have you quit something you wish you'd stuck with longer? I'd love to hear about it. And I invite you to join our free school community to connect with other entrepreneurs who are breaking through mindset blocks and supporting and celebrating each other's growth. Link in the description. I'm Joe, and I help entrepreneurs shift inward so they can move forward. See you next time.